Hi, I'm Anush Salaniwal.
Hi, I'm Michael Ohayon, and we'll be the host for today's podcast.
Welcome back. For those who don't know, the Scripps Professional Career Aspiration Club is an organization dedicated to interviewing professionals for many different career paths. We aim to help students find a career that's right for them.
And we have a very special guest today. Give a warm welcome to Donna Caeg. Ms. Caeg works for the California Department of Education in regulatory compliance. Ms. Caeg, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So, what is regulatory compliance?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you both for starting this podcast.
Thank you.
A reason to explore careers before you commit yourself to a program study is so important. A couple good reasons is it will save you a lot of time, money, and frustration before you make that commitment to a university or a community college or a trade school or maybe even the armed forces. Think of it this way. It's always better to have a plan or somewhat of a plan. But in order to do that, you've got to do some legwork. Like this podcast is fabulous.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Ask your audience asking questions, listening to this podcast, doing some research, Googling stuff. For instance, finding out what courses you have to take to complete that course of study. Those class descriptions are located in the course catalogs of the different programs that you want to study. And if those courses are things that you're interested in, then you're on your way. If not, then you've just saved yourself a lot of time and heartache because you didn't choose that path. I know sometimes you might feel overwhelmed, or maybe because there's too many choices, or just frankly, you have no earthly idea what career to choose. If you're feeling that way, I would suggest to match a career to what you already have an interest in, or a passion about, or a skill or a talent that you have. Your job really is trying to match the two. Once you know the career path, then that will tell you if you need to attend a university, a community college, or maybe a trade school, or maybe the military. So what is regulatory compliance? That phrase is pretty broad, and I can guarantee you that at 17, I had no idea what that meant. I didn't even know what it meant in college. And I actually stumbled onto this career later on after I graduated from college. But for me, it's been a really rewarding field. I've been in it for quite a while. But I'll break it down really simply what regulatory compliance, or another phrase that's used is regulatory affairs. And basically, it's a career that oversees or coordinates that a company or an agency is following certain laws and regulations that allows them to operate legally. So you can do this job for a company or you can work for a governmental agency. I happen to work for a governmental agency. If you work for a company, you'd be in contact with the governmental agency that oversees these laws and regulations where you work at. If you work for a governmental agency, then you would be overseeing the company or the agency to review that they are following all of the applicable laws. So in a nutshell, that's what regulatory compliance is.
Thank you. We really appreciate your preparedness, by the way. I mean, you're on top of it. Thank you. So what would you say, what are some laws that you've seen businesses break that they don't even know? Like they're not even aware what they've done is, is kind of a faux pas.
Well, that answer is specific and different for every business field. But I will say that you will need to know who is the governmental agency that oversees the rules and regulations for the company you work for. Most of the time, it's more than one governmental agency that is overseeing regulations in a company. For instance, if you work for a company that owned 100 childcare centers across the nation, that company would have to follow regulations from each state's daycare licensing department. They would have to follow rules and regulations from the local health department, from local and federal labor law departments. So it's can be quite extensive.
Well, businesses that aren't following those, make sure you follow what Ms. Caeg just said. So what are the most important laws that a business must follow?
Again, this is very specific to that type of business, so it's difficult to answer. Obviously, though, any law or regulation that your company would be owing money to the governmental agency, if it was not following it, would be a top priority to maintain those documents and standards.
And what would you say is the most challenging part of regulatory compliance, like particularly for governmental agencies?
I would probably say it's the changing regulations, the changing laws. They're constantly changing. You really have to stay on top of it. That's why it's important to continually update yourself on the changing laws of that particular governmental agency that your company is following. So going to like in-service trainings, uh, they have webinars that your company would want you to attend because you're going to become the expert in those laws and regulations for your company, and your company will depend on you to keep them out of hot water.
So many, so many people use the phrase that say, you never stop learning. Even if you're like 70, you never stop learning. And so as a company progresses, I feel like regulatory compliance should progress with the company itself. So how does regulatory compliance tie in with the company's end goal?
Well, if your company does not adhere to the governmental regulations, the worst case scenario is that your company is shut down or it's going to owe a lot of money to the government. So that is a huge incentive to follow the local, state, and federal laws and regulations. That's their end goal, is to stay out of trouble.
Yeah. So we know there's a few different, qualifications to take. There's the certificate for in compliance and risk management, and there's diploma of quality auditing. All of these. Which would you say is the best or most helpful, relevant qualification to take?
Well, this is the cool thing about this career, is there's no one way to go about it. I mean, I was a child and nutrition major, and I ended up in compliance. I am in compliance of child and nutrition programs, but I would say consider majoring in a field of study that you enjoy and possibly gives you some career options so that you become a subject matter expert. For instance, my passion was food nutrition, so that is what I majored in college. I also took courses in journalism and child development. My first job out of college was working for a nonprofit agency who worked with licensed daycare homes and centers to assist them with getting reimbursement from the U.S. Department of Agriculture for feeding children healthy meals. And they followed the U.S. Department of Agriculture's meal plan. So I have worked in the field of child nutrition and in this grassroots organization. And then after a few years, I ended up working for a state agency that oversees these child nutrition programs. So that's where, getting a degree or getting an education in a particular subject matter, and then seeking out those different agencies that have some compliance role. If you're more interested in the sciences, you might want to consider majoring in regulatory affairs, or majoring in science or biology or maybe environmental science. These majors are more geared toward working for a company or a governmental agency in the fields of science, such as biotech companies, pharmaceutical companies, food companies. If you're more interested in, let's say, social services, then you could, for instance, major in child development or psychology and then become a daycare licensing analyst with the California Department of Social Services. Another idea is if you're interested in accounting or finance, you could major in that and then end up working as a bank auditor for a company or with a governmental agency like the U.S. Federal Reserve. There are literally thousands of careers in this area. Another idea I would suggest is getting on these job search websites. One of my favorite ones is Indeed.com. And type in the search engine the word compliance or regulatory, and then type in a word that describes your interest. It could be science, it could be agriculture, accounting, healthcare, construction, outdoors. And then you'll see the results come up of the jobs out there that would be available. This can give you concrete jobs, that are there that, you can explore. And in the job descriptions that you have found, it will tell you what the qualifications are and what kind of education or experience that you'll need. Sometimes I think we kind of forget those job websites. It's really, you need to go there before you even are looking for a job. It's a good research tool. Another thing I would suggest is to make a list of all the things that would be important to you in a job. For instance, for me, I didn't want to work behind a desk. I also wanted to use my skill of writing and communicating and being of service to others. I found all those things in my career as a child nutritionist, and it happens to be in the field of regulatory compliance. Another thing, many compliance jobs don't have that word compliance in their job title. Notice my title is Child Nutrition Consultant, but all of my job revolves around compliance.
So how do you become a regulatory compliance officer? Like how do you make that leap from whatever you're studying to that career path?
Well, first I would say, is it the right match for you? For instance, I think it really helps to be curious, to be a good writer, to be detail oriented, and have some critical thinking skills. Consider doing a search using the phrase governmental agencies and look to see which ones might match your interest. For instance, if you really enjoy the outdoors, maybe working for either a company or the government agency dealing with those areas like the U.S. Department of Agriculture or Caltrans, that's the state Department of Highways and Roads in California, or California Fish and Game. There's, the U.S. Department, I think, of Interior is the federal governmental agency. There's just so many governmental agencies out there, it's mind-boggling. Another good website to check out is usajobs.gov. And that's the federal job website. So you'll see all of the federal governmental agencies on that website. And another good one for the state of California is called calhr.gov. That's calhr.gov. And both of these websites, they're, as I said, they're federal and state of California government job websites. If you're interested in another state, they would have the same thing.
Alrighty. So what do you think is the most difficult rule book to follow? Because, there's tons. There's OSHA, there's HIPAA, there's, local law, there's federal law. Which one of these is the most challenging?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know all of the different governmental agencies' regulations. So I would just say you only need to know the rule book of the agency you're working for.
So how do you keep up with the ever-changing rule book regarding COVID?
Well, I'm not an expert. You'll have to ask Dr. Fauci there.
Give us an elevator pitch on why people should be in regulatory compliance.
Well, I would just say one career isn't better than another. It's rather, what is the match for you? Does it meet what you want to give and what you want to take? For instance, take a look at who you are as a person, your likes and your dislikes, and let those characteristics and personality traits guide you to a career. If you don't do that, then your job is really going to be a drag. For me personally, a job in health service compliance has been very rewarding. It met my need to get away from my desk because I'm out in the field about 70% of the time. And I felt like over the years, I've made a big difference in the community and helping agencies understand how to comply to the often complex regulations.
I mean, from what it sounds like to me, I think probably the greatest appeal of this whole thing is just the customizability. I mean, regardless of who you are, what your passions are, what you prefer to do, regulatory compliance kind of has something for everyone.
Very, very much so. I mean, if you're interested in the sciences, you can go toward the regulatory area. If you're more interested in the legal part, then you could study law. If you're more interested in just more of a subject matter like biology or nutrition, study that and then go work for a nonprofit or a company, and then maybe if you like, go work for a government agency. It really does have a lot of flexibility, and I don't think a lot of people really think about compliance at all as a career. Regulatory affairs, that is a major in many universities, and that is a major if you're very interested in science. For instance, working for the Food and Drug Administration, working for pharmaceutical companies, for high-tech health and bio companies. Regulatory affairs, is another way to go. Even a degree in engineering, a lot of those places want engineers too to work in regulatory affairs. So it's a very broad area, and so I would encourage people to take a look at it.
So yeah, as you talked about customizability, so what made you passionate about child nutrition?
I've just always enjoyed nutrition. I've always been a foodie. I didn't really, back in my day, foodie, that wasn't even a term, foodie, right? Someone who enjoys, cooking and eating. I just had a love for that, and also learning about human behavior and child development. And actually, when I started school, I wanted to become a journalist. I thought I'd be a food writer. So I started out as a journalism major. And as I went along taking courses, I thought, oh, I don't want to be a journalist. I don't want to do this. And I think it would have helped if I had done some research before I went to college and done some research more about journalism. It just wasn't a fit for me. So what I did is I flipped it and majored in child nutrition, and then I minored in journalism. The journalism has always helped me in writing. When you work in compliance, you write a lot of reports, and they're very technical reports oftentimes. So that's why if you're a good writer, and you're very, specific and detail oriented, those are good traits to have in the area of compliance. And also, I was always interested in the world around me, current events. So I think that's helpful to have that interest too. But that's how I got into child nutrition, and I just stumbled upon it. In fact, believe it or not, in 4 years of college, not one professor told me anything about a governmental agency, which is mind-boggling, because in child nutrition, there's all kinds of governmental agencies that are overseeing those programs, and there's so many jobs out there in those areas.
All right. Well, that was such an insightful interview, Ms. Caeg. Thank you so much. I mean, you shared some incredible advice about, regulatory compliance and I guess life in general too. Well, hope you learned as much as we did. Huge thank you to Ms. Caeg for joining us today. We are SRPCEC and we hope you enjoyed. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.